Welcome to America's Heroes Group. This time with a partner, Veterans Legislative Voice, and our AHG Correspondent. Today is Saturday, October 7th, 2023. October is Breast Cancer, Mental Health, National Disability, and Domestic Violence Awareness Month. We'll probably hit all those topics this month. Our host is Cliff Kelley. I'm Sean Claiborne, the co-host. Our executive producer is Glenda Smith, and our digital media producer always is Ivan Ortega of Scouts Honor Productions. And we have with us Stephanie Kalota, our U.S. Army Sergeant, first class when she was in the military. Now she's a founder and CEO of the Veterans Legislative Voice, her podcast, and our AHG Correspondent. How are you doing today? Stephanie?
Hi, how are you doing?
Pretty good, pretty good. So congratulations on your new podcast. Tell us about that a little bit.
Yes, a funny thing, everybody else, inside information that's been working with this, I kept forgetting to bring it up in the two previous times I've been on the show, so thank you for starting with it. Yes, I started a podcast, Veteran Legislative Voice, just a short 5 to 10 minute segments, just covering bills and different things that's been happening. Short and sweet thing and topics that pretty much we couldn't really fit into a whole 30-minute time block. So nice, short and sweet segment for everybody to understand.
Wow, I look forward to seeing that. Sounds pretty good. Now tell us what's going on with the Speaker of the House. So he's McCarthy, as we talked about last week. You know, if you look kind of weak or ill a little bit with his leadership skills, especially what happened with the near government shutdown that we avoided, thank God. So what is going on with that? Well,
okay, so I say this a lot. Congress is the original reality show, and this week has really proven that. So with everything that's been going on, I've watched the entire vote that's happened for the Speaker with vacating his chair, and it was very interesting. And anybody that really wants to watch, I can actually have the links on my podcast as well that you guys can watch yourselves. It was very interesting because it was only all of the debates and all of the infighting were all Republicans.
Wow.
Democrats kept really outside of this, except for the time when it came to the votes. For the starting of these type of votes, they usually ask for a voice vote, and it wasn't Kevin McCarthy who was in charge of the chamber at the time. They had referred it to a temporary pro tem speaker. And I believe it was Representative Womack, and when they asked for yeas and nays to vacate the chair, the yeas were very small. It was like just Matt Gaetz, Representative Gaetz, and his followers, those 8, and then the nays were very loud, the rest of the Republican Party. But when it came to the actual vote by individual, all of the Democrats voted yay. Yeah, and so a lot of things have been trying to be interpreted in that because no one has really found out what was the big reason why this happened, because Democrats could have easily just said present, like what happened with the Speaker earlier this year when Gaetz changed his from nay to present, so they had enough votes. They could say present and just stayed out of the entire voting process, and it wouldn't be counted in the math. So it really shows how the Democrats feel about McCarthy and everything that he's been handling in the past 9 months.
Is it really?
And one of those reasons is really the budget and the debt ceiling, because he kept changing his mind and he kept promising and breaking promises between both parties. And so that's one of the things that's been really difficult. And apparently there was some sort of agreement that happened when he met with President Biden and the other leaders when they were doing the debt ceiling. There was an agreement for the federal funding, but he never followed through on the agreement, and he reneged.
Wow.
And so that's been one of the biggest issues. That's the reason why the funding had been stalled so long, because he probably promised everybody. And of course, that contradicts everything, and you're never going to make everybody happy.
Wow.
You're going to be ending up hurting everyone. And this really impacts a lot of military and civilian and veterans as well when we get down to it.
Yeah, we talked about that last time too, because with the government shutdown, a lot of things don't happen. We have military members serving but not getting paid, and then having to get back pay. And then you also have family members of those military service members that are depending on those paychecks.
Yes, and contractors would not even be paid. Like 90% chance that they wouldn't even be paid at all. They'll be furloughed, and they will be filing for unemployment.
That's really, I mean, so it seems that the most vocal people from the Republican Party tend to be the ones that aren't the most, don't have the real vision or understanding of how the government really works. Also, don't seem to have a clear vision of what they're trying to accomplish, and kind of just ping pong back and forth on whatever is a hot topic of the day. Does that seem foreign? Is that a foreign idea?
I apologize. Can you say that again?
So it seems like the most vocal people in the Republican Party right now today are the ones that don't really have a clear vision for the party itself or for the government. And they also seem to be ping-ponging back on different topics, whatever's hot, to press buttons and try to stage theater almost, as opposed to getting real legislation done. Not to say that Democrats are necessarily better, but you don't see that from the Democratic Party. They seem more of a well-oiled machine. They know what they're trying to do. They know what they're trying to accomplish. Everything is kind of almost choreographed.
Right, and agreed upon before they even come out. Yes, I agree with that, and that does happen a lot. Actually, Representative Gates has been accused of seeking funding while he's doing this big fight in Congress, and trying to make a whole lot of money out of that, so that for elections for later, he'll be able to pretty much be reelected again. So it's been pretty frustrating and everybody's in turmoil. One of the other things about this is that those small amount of people want very specific things that is the complete opposite of the other parties that have control. So you can't try to keep to very strict guidelines and expect everyone to agree to it. And that's been one of the things that has been the most frustrating during that time frame.
Is it a big deal that we don't have a speaker right now of the House?
It is huge, because there was a timeline. McCarthy had a timeline of how to get all the government funding bill completed, and all the caucuses were supposed to submit their plans. Everything was supposed to be done, and there was a whole schedule for this. And now that's just thrown to the wind. And now the temporary speaker, I can't remember his name right now, but he would be. He basically set everybody out for a week, mostly to cool a lot of tempers, because he was worried that there would be a fight actually ensuing, like during the speaker ballots last year, earlier this year. So that's really possible. With any new speaker that we may have, we might actually see committee reassignments and changes that may happen, which can affect the armed services and the veterans committees and how effective they could be.
What's the pulse of the people about this whole situation? How are they favoring now that they've seen this kind of debacle in the Republican Party?
Oh gosh, it's mixed across the board, because I think a lot of people have been. It really depends on how spun up they are on what's really going on, and whether they pretty much. Depends on whether they're actually taking in on misdirections and lies that's out there, and then others that are actually understanding. A lot of people are frustrated, and a lot of people are mad. Yes.
And this goes into November of next year.
Yes.
Right around the corner, an election coming up.
Right. November 14th is when the continuing resolution will end, and we have the potential of having a government shutdown again. It's really frustrating for the government funding, because with the short-term understanding of what's really going to be the funding, military units don't know what to plan on, whether they will have the funding to actually send people to schools, whether they can take soldiers to weapons qualification ranges to basically get everybody qualified and have their their readiness up. Veterans would also be affected, because the government bill, the GI Bill hotline will not be available when there's a government shutdown. Other things will actually be stopped and furloughed when government shutdowns happen. A lot of things are paused on what they had actually asked for funding, and they're not sure whether they're going to get it in the time frame leading up to the end of the continuing resolution. So there's a lot of things that are affecting military and veterans right now. There's a lot of people that if they haven't gotten their PCS orders for moving from one station to the other, they're pretty much stalled. They've been pausing a lot of transfers and moves, so that affects military families as well.
And what's the news with Tuberville now? Is he still in his rant and rave right now?
Yes. So if anybody understands, Senator Tuberville of Alabama has been basically staying on a hold for military promotions. Typically, for military promotions, they just do a unanimous, everybody's okay with this, okay, cool, we're going to approve, and they do it by group. There's so many people right now that are waiting for their promotions to be approved by the Senate. It's over 300, and they actually calculated it would take over 700 hours to go through each individual person for a yay and a nay vote. So it's causing a lot of problems that's going on in the Senate as well. He's still holding on to the hold, and so they've had to do individual votes for the next chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff because General Miley's already left, and they've also done it for the Army, Air Force, and Marine Corps, I believe, are the three services. They're working on those right now, and they're hoping to go down the line, but they have to go by individual votes now. And there's a group of senators that don't want to pretty much agree to any bill until pretty much they have the government funding settled.
Okay.
And so
that pushes it back in after to December, maybe we're talking about, possibly?
Yes. So it's about 20 some odd. One of them I know is my senator, Rick Scott, that want to hold off on any bills until they really get funding settled, and it's really crazy. So I don't know how that's going to be affecting the military promotions. I assume they would be, because I'll assume they would be until they say they're not. And so that can affect a whole lot of things as well. The problem with not going through with these promotions is that there's a lot of people that are in acting positions. There's a lot of deputies and XOs that are working both their XO job and their actual commander's job. And having that double work will really dampen down the quality of work and the readiness for anything that may happen. So it can be a real national security issue when it comes to this, because they're diverting and they're also delegating too much and separating their time out. So they're not going to be able to give them the full time frame that's needed for the job.
And I know it's frustrating for a lot of people in command, because sometimes they're doing double duty, triple duty for the do jobs that they aren't necessarily in, but just filling in.
Yes.
Wow. Now, have you ever seen, or do you remember or recall, or having you research it, was there ever a time when Democrats caused a government shutdown, and when they had control of the Congress, and there was a Republican president, or any president for that matter?
One of the most notable ones is when Newt Gingrich was actually in Congress, and I believe it was President Clinton, and that was the longest government shutdown we had until President Trump. And that was in the 90s. I believe it was 35 days. Trump had it for 38, I think. But
that was it the Democrats that caused that, or was that the Republicans? Because I thought Newt Gingrich was the person.
It was the Republicans, but the Democrats were really fighting with it too. Okay. So it was. I would say it was both.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say it was both, because it was a fight on both parts. And if I cannot remember the specifics on that. I could guess, but I don't think I would be correct on that.
I can't remember either. I mean,
I was 9 years old at the time, so it wouldn't be something I would be watching on CNN.
Yeah, so. I was like in college or something like that. But yeah, it was. I mean, it's ironic that we keep going through this cycle over and over and over again, and we keep kicking the can down the road. The Republicans are lacking leadership, seems like, an organization also, it seems like. Who is the most likely person to be the Speaker of the House at this point?
It's kind of up in the air. There are a few candidates already shown out. I know Jim Jordan has already threw his name in. He was the first one to do that. If anybody knows Jim Jordan, he's the one that's been leading the impeachment on President Biden and other issues that's been happening in the Judicial Committee. Another one would be Steve Scalise. That one's, to to me is a little bit more up in the air because he's currently battling blood cancer. So that's really scary for him. I would worry about his own health for that. As a person, I would really worry about him. And then Representative Elise Stefanik is also considering it. She is the chairman of the Republican committee right now, chairwoman, excuse me, and she is, I would throw my support. I'm not a Republican, but I agree with the most, at least for the things that she goes for. She's also in the Armed Services Committee. She does a lot for veterans as well. She has a good understanding of what goes in with those things. And I believe Representative Hearn from Oklahoma is also in, but I do not have a whole lot of information on that guy yet. He hasn't been that much involved with military and veterans, so I haven't had a lot of cross with him.
Well, will she at least be the first female Republican speaker?
Yes, she would, because Nancy Pelosi was the first, and she was the Democrat. So, yes, she would be the first woman speaker for the Republicans, which I think would be great.
It seems like an opportunity there.
Yes.
Walk me down in a little bit of time we have left, because one thing I like about what you do is that you basically cut through for veterans and people that are, because a lot of veterans are interested in politics because we served in the military, and the government have had at one point at least a major control over your life. Whether you're going to get deployed, whether you're going to be stationed someplace, you work for Uncle Sam for at least a brief period of your life.
Yes.
So in that regard, walk us through what is the impeachment for Biden all about, and is it legit in any way?
Okay. So it's tricky. So I haven't seen a whole lot of hard evidence on this. There's been a whole lot of things that the opponents of Biden have tried to throw out there. Right now, it's just an impeachment inquiry, and they're having committees on this. The actual inquiry hearing they had with witnesses were entertaining because they didn't actually have any evidence or knowledge of actual crimes that President Biden had possibly committed. One of the things that they're really that the inquiry is about is trying to see on whether President Biden is tied into any of the crimes that his son, Hunter, has possibly committed. There's been a few times and a few instances that people believe that Hunter tried to use his father, the vice president at the time or former vice president at the time, to try to bolster his own career and try to get some more money out of that as an influence. And so they're trying to find that and trying to find whether President Biden had benefited from his son's maneuvers financially. I have yet to see it. Once we do, we can be judged from that. But when that comes to it, we'll see how that goes. But I say I'm waiting until evidence comes until I make a final decision. If there's no evidence that comes, you might know what my decision would be.
Wow. Well, thanks for that. We really appreciate it. We ran out of time, but we're going to have you back again, of course. And what's the name of your podcast?
Veteran Legislative Voice. You can find me on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple iTunes, and I also put the links on my Facebook, Instagram, and X.
America's Heroes Group. We'll be right back.
All right, thank you.
Welcome back to America's Heroes Group, this time with our roundtable with our sponsor and our partner, the RHF. Today is Saturday, October 7th, 2023. October is Breast Cancer, Mental Health, National Disability, and Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Our host is Cliff Kelley. I'm Sean Claiborne, the co-host. Our executive producer is Glenda Smith. Our digital media producer is Ivan Ortega of Scouts Earner Productions. And we have with us again our partner, Darren Jeffrey, is a founding board member of RHF and also the original creator builder for the TV show American Ninja Warrior that aired on NBC. He's also brought us a great panelist, and that is our next distinguished guest. He's a friend of our partner, the Rick Herrmann Foundation. He specializes in using video games and television shows to create custom mental health solutions for his clients. He received his bachelor's degree in social work at North Carolina Agricultural and Technical State University and his master's at Clark Atlanta before returning back to NCA&T State to get his doctorate at the university's program of rehabilitation, counseling, and counselor education. He is said to have achieved some unorthodox and if not groundbreaking success in using technology to heal people. We welcome our returning guest and our friend of RHF, Greensboro, North Carolina native and licensed clinical social worker and therapist, Dr. Owen T. Guest. How are you doing today?
I'm fine. How you doing?
All right. Should we call you Dr. Owen?
Either way, man.
So I'm glad to have you on our show, and Darren, I'm glad to have you back with us as well. You always have some exciting stuff.
It's great to hear your voice.
Yeah, so it's great to hear your voice. And that you always have some really exciting things. I'm really, we could go on for this topic for about at least an hour because with so much stuff we want to get into. Now, using technology and using that to treat people with personality disorders, PTSD, socialization issues, things like that. Tell us about that, Doctor.
Oh, yeah. This is something I hold near and dear to my heart. As a millennial, we grew up with technology, right? So being able to use it as a way to take people out of their dysfunction or disorder really helps, because therapy can be a very traumatic experience. I know it sounds weird to some people listening to it, but if you're going to therapy all the time to get beat up, or then a therapist telling you this is what's wrong with you, this is what's wrong with you, you can be very discouraged to come back to therapy. I know I would. But being able to use gaming, television shows as examples to take the person out and be able to see what it is that they're doing, or see the extent that they could do, and be able to use the strategies that we use, coping skills, all that, you're actually practicing rather than always having to be reactive. And sometimes therapy is being taught to how to be reactive rather than be proactive.
So I know on your previous visit here, when you sat down with Ernesto, you talked about how when you were a kid, you used television to treat yourself. If I'm understanding that correctly, is that right?
Yeah, just to be able to identify. Yeah.
Okay. Tell us about that and how that got you started to do what you do. How did that trajectory start? It seems like that's when your ideas kind of became started to develop, and how it kind of helped you create what you've created today.
This was the earliest memory that I had of this was I was in fourth grade, and we had to take a trip to a camp for a week, and everybody was devastated as a kid because Power Rangers was really popular back then. And so I was that weird kid that was in the back of the bus talking to a parent saying that, the Black Ranger was the Green Ranger, and he's going through this character development. He's like learning to be selfless because he was a real selfish Green Ranger. Now he's sacrificing himself for a Red Ranger. And they're like, what kind of kid are you? Talking about this in fourth grade. And so I always like seeing the growth of characters and seeing how that worked. And so as I matured and got into mental health, that was a lot of the case studies that we got. And I was able to catch on really fast just off of what I've learned watching television and being able to look deeper into things, because regardless of whatever, any type of media, there's some type of realism there. There's some type of relatability there. And a lot of the characters, when it came to anxiety, connected to me as a young person with TGIF shows like Boy Meets World, Family Matters, those types of things, right? You see yourself, and you see yourself in a lot of the characters, Corey Matthews, Sean, Steve Urkel, Eddie Winslow, those type of characters where you said, oh man, you know what, if I dated a girl, this is the type of girl that I wanted, but why did he react this way? And you being able to see those scenarios and being able to kind of project what it is that you wanted to be and could be, the mistakes that you can make, really helped me out. And I said, okay, cool. We were already experiencing some type of therapy using television and those family type shows then, and then being able to put that in conjunction with theory, I think is really entertaining for people to go back to those times and connect with that child, because that's what therapy is connecting with that inner child that's in you, and being able to do that, and then connecting and then growing and seeing how you are projecting as an adult.
Well, it seems like you kind of connected and almost created a whole different discipline because you can it seems like you can go into so many different ways with this. I'm thinking back now. You got me thinking back to my AP Psych class in high school. And thinking back to my pop culture classes in college, because when you look at how television and communication and radio has shaped society and shaped behavior. And now you're using it to actually, in some ways, people argue, we don't have to go into that tangent, but in some ways, the mass communication can be a programming tool, with propaganda, for example. But then now using those same methods and tools to treat social behavior or social dysfunctions or personality disorders and behavioral issues and things like that, PTSD, trauma, family conflict, those types of things. So how do you use intense video games and television to work remotely with people? How does that work? And then after that, that's going to lead into a question I have for Darren.
Okay. In terms of intense video games, it's being able to, we use a term that's called gamification, right? And so it's being able to identify the mood, the setting, the characters, the relatability of the characters, and even sometimes the music of how a person reacts. And so sometimes I give out a questionnaire where a person fills that out, and then I develop a scale to see kind of where that game ranks them on the anxiety scale based off of the ACE questionnaire. And so using that person then is able, I give a task, for example. I say, okay, hey, I want you to spend an hour playing Call of Duty. I want to, before that, I want you to assess your stress level before, during, and after. And then we're going to see how you're responding to people before, like if somebody's at home and they're stressed out and they're probably more antsy towards their wife or girlfriend or husband, whatever you may take, and seeing that progression to afterwards. And so it's being able to say, okay, how are you benefiting from it? What stages and things are helping you kind of relax? Because gaming is a form of relaxation, regardless. Was it the people that you were talking to in your chat while you're playing Call of Duty or playing a fighting game? Those type of things. And all this was based off of my dissertation that was used using Street Fighter as a way to understand anxiety and trauma based off the ACE questionnaire in a positive way. And those results show that people on every scale from 1 to 3, 1 being the least, 3 being the most, benefited positively from playing in an intense tournament using a fighting game. And the characters that they identified and their anxiety and their social anxiety went drastically down, no matter the form of trauma.
Wow. So I relate that a lot to what Darren does with the RHF Foundation and with Rick's Place, because you build obstacle courses where people are gaming in a physical way to do the same thing, reduce stress and connect with their family, doing it as a family activity. Sometimes as a distraction.
Yeah, and that's where Dr. Guest and I met. Was at Rick's Place. We were doing the Ninja Warrior course, and he was able to make it down. And as soon as that first meeting was over, we started collaborating on ways to take what he's doing is over the top. It's over the horizon. This is. Anyone that's listening right now, your eyebrows should be way up above your forehead, because what he's doing for our population, especially in the military, because we're north of 85% of the enlisted population are also gamers. So we're talking to the largest target audience that also experiences a lot of stress because of their profession. And so, what he's doing is so over the top, over the horizon. So my excitement is, and his as well, is how we can integrate more of the physical elements in creating physical experiences. So, we've got conversations going where we could take a classroom in a school and we could transform that classroom the way I go in and I transform television sets, like Games for Big Brother or, Biggest Loser, all the television shows, games that we've made over the years, and create a physical experience utilizing his psychological curriculum. So the work that the two of us are moving towards together, it's very exciting.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Because I made that connection almost because I haven't. I mean, the games you described, Dr. Owen, I'm familiar with, but when I first thought about it, I was thinking about games like Fortnite or something like on a VR headset, something like that. I remember even in the military, they were just starting to experiment with training people with video technology. Not quite, wouldn't call it a video game, but some of it seemed kind of old, outdated, like something was made in the 70s, like horror movie show or something like that. But it was stuff that was, they were trying to use virtual things to teach you how to shoot. They teach you how to, go into a building, whatever, something like that. Infantry skills, things like that. Where do you see how do you see the technology developing, and what do you wish the technology could do that it doesn't do today?
Oh wow. Let me tell you this one thing, man. I had this one client where he was extremely socially awkward, suffered from severe PTSD, also had schizophrenia. And one of the things that I've used with him is using VR, a VR headset, to where it was during the pandemic, and we used that, and that's how a lot of people got to meet people, where there were like these little rooms where people could meet. They would have their own avatars, and it's learning how to talk to people was his biggest thing. I always tell people, if you have social anxiety, all social anxiety isn't the same. Some people's social anxiety is initiating conversation. Some people's social anxiety is just conversation in general. We pinpointed his was initiating conversation. If anybody could come up to him, that was the automatic, like a flick of a light bulb will say, hey, this person accepts me. I can say what I want to say in context, of course. Okay. Say what I want to say, and then open up. And him being able to practice that and being able to then move to people and then be able to recognize those people's voices once the lockdown was taken away, and meeting people in his community helped him tremendously. So VR is a very big thing, especially if you can connect with people that have those headsets, to be able to foster community, to move outside of the video game. I also believe that just with the technology that's going on, you can have these things at like sporting events, to where people who would not really speak to one another could just relax and watch a game or something like that, and really connect. We have a lot of gaming events around the world that people come out that would never really come out and socialize, but to be able to socialize with like-minded people and just things that they enjoy takes down the pressure a lot. And so I think being able to somehow get some type of physical exercises in places like that, as well as schools, as Darren mentioned, is the next step, because kids are going to school for video games now. Kids are going to college on full rides.
Yeah.
Video games. So what do we do with those kids, and making sure that they are acknowledged student athletes, but being able to give them some physical aspects, and then also being able to show that D1 football player, he can do the same thing that this person is doing video game wise, and being part of those courses as well. I think it's really good, especially the players that will be transitioning and not making pro teams, those type of things. Mental health helps with transition for everybody. So,
what do you think is the reason why? Well, first, let me ask you this question: is there evidence that shows that people or our generations are getting less and less social, physically or interaction-wise? Are we getting more socially dysfunctional?
Oh yeah, there actually, I can't put them out right there on the top of my head, but yeah, there are. You just look at just not even in America. You can look overseas, where people are trying to get kids out just to play. We've had more initiatives just with national sports leagues trying to get kids out and play. I remember first time I saw the NFL play type thing, and that was people telling kids, might get your behind out of the house and play. Like, you guys aren't doing that anymore. What's going on? And so being able to, I think, bridge the gap being able, like you said, having a Fortnite. Imagine a Fortnite built course. I don't know what kid wouldn't want to do that.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
You know, that would be amazing.
And that's interesting because when I think about the kids that I help raise, so they do what. Now this is the weird thing about it. So a boy and a girl, both about 5 years apart. However, they have like every video game that you can imagine. They have like a whole library room full of video games, and half of them they don't even play. But we bought them a VR headset. Both of them had VR headsets. They were excited about it at first, but they went back to the Xbox. The Xbox was the thing that they also the tower, the PC tower that they got, whatever. They loved that, and they kind of left the VR headsets alone. However, if we say take some water guns, let's go outside and shoot some water guns and water balloons, they're lined up and ready to go out and do whatever. If you talked about doing like a obstacle course, they're ready to go right then and there. Now, Darren, what is your take on that?
Nice. Yeah, you know, there's a really nice blend of endorphins that are released when you're physically active, you know, and it's always, you know, it's funny because for me personally, like, I don't really like to work out, but every time I do, I think to myself, oh, this is great. I should do this more often. So, you know, just kind of a little merry-go-round. But my point is that, you know, that physical, experience of working out on top of, you know, what Dr. Owen Guest is talking about with, you know, the sense of connection, the sense of connectedness, the sense, you know, a sense of the world, you know, a sense of community that you can gain from gaming. Plus, at the end of the day, you know, I'm an early adopter. I think that I think people that participate in esports are athletes. I believe it or not, and I've had lots of lively debates with colleagues about that. But, you know, at the end of the day, blending the physical element with the esport piece, to me, is just something. Nobody's done it. It hasn't been done yet. I've written multiple proposals for live events to have esport, you know, live esport events to have some kind of a physical challenge for the athletes as well. So it's definitely up and coming. And to me, there's no downside to getting after trying to blend the two experiences together.
Now, Dr. Owen, do you think that, and I think there's a lot of evidence that shows this, but I'm going to get your opinion on this directly as a doctor, as somebody who's worked in this field and is an expert. Has technology, when we're talking about cell phones, we're talking about Xboxes and the PlayStations and all this stuff, not single any one gaming console out, but any like these gaming consoles, is that responsible for the kids that grew up in the late 90s and then on, the millennials and then on, like the younger millennials that came in the later part of the millennial generation and up till today? Or is that technology responsible for our social misfunctions or dysfunctions that we're having today?
Oh, that's a very loaded question. This is one of the questions where you see on Good Morning America, right? Mm-hmm. So I love that question. But I would say it's a mixed bag. We're living in such a great area because you're talking about latchkey kids. You're talking about kids that are coming from a greater amount of single parent households, and those parents not being able to help them be as active as possible. But that it is a contributing factor, but it also shows some positivity to it as well. A lot of those kids did not have the opportunity to do sports or weren't good enough, but then they were able to find community within the games. So I say it's a little bit of both, but to the negative side of things, like with anything, you can dive into it too much, and it become a detriment to you socially. I think one of the things that is a negative is going to be what I like to call the toxic streamer syndrome, where people are yelling, screaming, and cursing out each other for no reason, where my dad's generation would just laugh it off and have fun. Mm-hmm. But when we talk about the endorphins that are released with gaming, it's the same things you get from sports. the exact same endorphins, the exact same sense of community, all those things. So that's a positive point. But being able to regulate emotion and then making clickbait emotion look trendy, where, like I said, you're screaming, yelling, cursing, breaking TVs, all that stuff. It's the same thing where people would say, "Oh, is it bad for these hockey players to beat each other up?"
Right. Or watch, a violent TV show or something like that.
Exactly. Right. It's okay. This is what we come to expect, and I found that a lot of times when parents come to me and say, "My kid is acting like this. This is how I raised them," I say, "Okay, what is he or she watching on YouTube? What are they watching on Twitch?" And then I say, "Sit down with your kid and watch it." And they'll say, "Oh my God, that's exactly how my kid sounds."
Wow. And I can think of all these different memes and videos on YouTube where kids are like, it's going berserk because the dad shut off the electricity as a joke while he's playing, a video game. He's in Call of Duty doing something, whatever, and the console goes out and the kid's like going nuts. He's about to kill somebody. And there's like this hours, you can go hours and hours of watching these videos of the parents have uploaded. So part two of the question is, now these later millennials are parents themselves today. So what advice would you give them about better ways to socialize their kids and also to lead healthier lives and use technology in a positive way?
That question is near and dear to my heart. I have a 5-year-old. He turned 6 in January, and he loves video games. He's my kid, so he does. It's part of my thing. But it's being able to have a healthy amount of things, right? He has a good friend group, a good family orientation, and it's just being able to, you expose them and you tell them why you're playing the games, what this game means. And I think a lot of times we forget those things, and because when we were growing up, like I said, some people's parents weren't there. Mm-hmm. So you ask for Grand Theft Auto, they just said, "Okay, whatever, sounds like a car game."
Right. And then they're doing it for real. In Chicago, it's actually a real big problem. A lot of people were copying. Kids were copying from age 10, going out and stealing cars and didn't know what to do with the car. Just stole the car and wrecked it and dealing with all the consequences after that.
Yeah, I think it's I don't want to be hyperbolic, but it's as just like the drug epidemic. Parents weren't educated when it comes to drugs. If you're not educated when it comes to video games, your kid's going to falter. If you don't have the proper support or try to establish that, bad things are going to happen. I've had parents that have had their kids in Pee Wee football and then they're drinking energy drinks. And they think just because it's cool or that's what the other kids are doing, they don't know how much that energy drink or is affecting their kids' anxiety or depression or ADHD. So I think everything is predicated on educating yourself and making sure you're exposed to what your child is doing and giving them a well-rounded lifestyle and support system.
Wow. So finally, because we have a couple minutes left, so you also basically are also pretty much telehealth for the most part. Is that right?
Yes.
So anybody around the country, technically around the world, could really use your services. They could reach out to you, and they could hire you as a therapist or as a social worker, so that they can get help for themselves or for their kids or their family. How does that process work in the last 2 minutes that we have, and what's the cost? Is it expensive?
Oh, it's going to be based off of the insurance. Sometimes people even put me on as consultant, being able to do consultant work, those type of things. But cost is being able to talk about, and majority of the time when it comes to therapy, it's based off of your copay.
Now, how do people reach out to you? How do they find you?
I can give everybody my email. You can tell I'm a millennial because I've had this since high school, but I've been able to make it more professional. But you can email me at Owen Guess, that's OwenGuess, like guess who, at Hotmail, hotmail.com. And then when you're talking about my phone number, what we're talking about is, let me see this. Hold on. My business phone number is going to be 919-228-9615. Again, that's 919-228-9615. I'm going to be putting up a practice website pretty soon where it's going to be called Neji Trev LLC, NTV, not MTV, NTV. And we'll be putting ourselves out there even more, and hopefully we'll be able to help out more families and individuals.
We appreciate your time. Both of you guys give us some really great information. Love to have you back to kind of get into this. Like I said, we could probably go for another hour on this topic, and I really do believe this could be really the precipice of groundbreaking field of study that hasn't really been, that doesn't exist right now. I mean, as a field of study per se. Appreciate you guys, Darren and Dr. Owen. Thank you.
You as well, man. You as well, Sean. It's a pleasure.
This is America's Heroes Group. We'll be right back.
Hi, this is Cliff Kelley, Vietnam veteran, co-founder, and host of America's Heroes Group. We have helped hundreds and thousands of veterans find the resources they needed to move on past trauma, find the services they need to heal, find training, jobs, and housing. That's our mission. To support this mission so that we can continue our work and have even more veteran stories of overcoming and success, we need your help. Right now, please consider making a donation to America's Heroes Group. Dig deep and give what you can to support this mission and help those veterans in need. You can donate through Chase Bank's Zelle app by adding America's Heroes Group as a recipient with our phone number 312-804-5831. You can donate through PayPal on our website, americashg.org. From the home page, go to donations, or you can go straight to www.americashg.org/donations. And finally, you can send a check to America's Heroes Group, Inc., 155 North Quaker Drive, Suite 4250, Chicago, Illinois, 60606.
We have in our Chase bags, we have a care package of hygiene, we have shaving equipment, we have razors, and for the women we have the same personal hygiene items for them as well. And we want to say thank you for their service. This is Chase Bank. Thank you very much. People in the neighborhood, free haircuts, and service, and food. Look good. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your service. Okay.
On behalf of Cliff Kelley, America's Heroes Group, we sincerely thank Chase Bank for coming where it matters to help homeless veterans have a hot meal today and a care package. We are sincerely grateful for this partnership.
Welcome to America's Heroes Group. Hear your voice where we connect the disconnected intentionally.
Who is Cliff Kelley, the governor of talk radio, the icon of radio throughout the world.
Chauncey Spencer II and I, again, share a special relationship. His late great father, Tuskegee Airman Chauncey E. Spencer, took me as a child on my first airplane ride.
Wow.
Yeah.
This is something that people need to see. Often we don't, do the things to show how great our people are. It changes the paradigm of how people think about us. about the collective consciousness of what it means to be us.
And we've been having great conversations about trying to get more African Americans into aviation. And we got a bill that we're trying to get passed that would allow the Pell Grant to be used to help finance aviation education.
This is where I started with this entire conversation by saying, if it were not for America's Heroes Group, I would have given up. So I want to get all my accolades out the way on behalf of America's Heroes Group. Ms. Glenda, thank you. Thank you for encouraging me to press on. I would encourage you all to support this organization. One thing for sure, America's Hero Group is out there. Ms. Glenda will take the time. Ms. Glenda Smith will take the time to listen to you and to steer you in the direction that you need to go.
Thank you for watching another episode of America's Heroes Group, where we provide education about resources and information for our veterans, military, and their family.
Welcome back to America's Heroes Group. This time we are globally connected with Military Family Matters and our partner, family caregiver Keisha L. Jackson. Today is Saturday, October 7th, 2023. October is Breast Cancer, Mental Health, National Disability, and Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Our host is Cliff Kelley. I'm Sean Claiborne, the co-host. Our executive producer is Glenda Smith, and our digital media producer is Ivan Ortega of Scotch Honor Productions. And we have our partner with us, Keisha L. Jackson, U.S. Air Force veteran and family caregiver. And she brought us a panelist today. That's Luke Burke, U.S. Army veteran, photographer, and the owner of LB Studio, an emerging production company. How are you doing today?
I am good. Thank you guys for having me.
So you have an interesting job because you are an Army veteran, a photographer, and the owner of a studio. And aside from being a family man who coaches basketball in D.C. area, you host a podcast currently focused on mental health awareness. And also you began production on a documentary titled My Journey to Vietnam. Tell us about this documentary that you're producing now, and what made you do this topic.
Yeah, My Journey to Vietnam is a documentary I'm working on about my dad, who comes from a small town, was drafted into Vietnam. You know, a lot of kids today don't know that people were drafted, but my dad was told, hey, you're going to the Army. So what pretty much inspired me to do this was to tell this story, because I believe my dad has a great story, has an interesting story, and he's always had a very interesting view on life, even telling some of his Vietnam stories. So that's kind of what it is. It's just this journey from a small town and how he landed all the way across the world into Vietnam. So
Wow.
that's what it's about.
Wow. And Keisha, I have to ask you, how did you come across Luke and to bring him here today?
Yeah, so Luke is a friend of mine. He's one of those, like I said, a multimedia creative, and I consider myself one. And so Luke he's done work for me in terms of photography, but currently we're working on a project together now where we're producing a short video about teen caregivers. And we're always kind of just brainstorming and talking about other projects that we want to work on. So I met him about, maybe about 5 or 6 years ago. And we've been working together ever since.
Wow. So tell us about the documentary. So your father gets drafted to go to Vietnam. And how were you born yet, or how old were you at the time?
No, I actually wasn't born yet, because my dad, this was in 1969, so I wasn't born yet, but my sister, my oldest sister, as my dad put it in one of my videos, he said she was in the basket. So my oldest sister, and my dad left when he was like 19 years old, so that is really wild to me, because when I joined the Army, I was 17, 18 years old. I couldn't imagine being thrown into Vietnam. I volunteered for the Army. Mm-hmm. He didn't. So I couldn't imagine being thrown right into that. So I was not born yet, but my oldest sister was her mom was pregnant with her.
Well, I can relate to that a lot, because my dad, I didn't even know my dad was a Vietnam vet. And he had some harrowing experiences in Vietnam. I guess they took to his grave. I was born after the Vietnam War also, so he came back home, thank God, and was able to have me. Now, that being said, that did affect my decision, learning that he was a Vietnam vet, to join the military. Did that affect you at all?
It didn't very much in my decision to join, but it impacted me after I joined. And the story I'll tell real quick, I was in the Army, so in basic training back then, it was not far back, but in 2000 they were allowed to threaten you and do all kinds of things. So one of the things that we did was a live fire exercise. We would go out, and from what I'm told, they were so far above you, they were not going to hit you, but you could see the tracer rounds because it was at night.
Yeah.
So
that's what you went through. You're talking about your dad's experience.
That was my experience in basic training.
Yeah, I went through the same. Yeah, you have to go through. There's a big wall behind you, and they're simulating you doing a beach storming or something like that. These guys in these towers with these like M60s shooting above your head, and your drill sergeant standing up, like nothing's happened, but you got to low crawl through all this and then make it to the tower, basically.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. But that moment is actually when it hit me about my dad's Vietnam service, because growing up, you hear all the stories. And it's like, okay, he's telling all these Vietnam stories, blah, blah, blah. But then when I had that moment, because I was actually fearful in that moment, it really hit me. And I remember specifically having the one question that I couldn't wait to ask my dad. And that question was, how did you survive? Like, how did you survive in a real environment? I knew that this wasn't real. Well, in the back of my mind, I was still scared, but I knew it wasn't real. So in that moment when we were done, it hit me like, wow, my dad actually really experienced this. And, I just couldn't imagine how he did it. So that's really what piqued my interest about, man, how did this guy survive Vietnam at 19 years old? So that's pretty much what started it.
When I think about Vietnam, and because it seemed like we're about the same age, in the same age group, I remember growing up and looking at all these stories about Vietnam. Vietnam was like the country had not really healed during our childhood, because there was all the movies are out. Rambo, First Blood. You had Chuck Norris movie. What was it called? I kept the name of it, but the thing was going back to Vietnam or something, whatever. All these movies that came out during that time frame, they were centered around Vietnam, from Platoon to Full Metal Jacket. The list goes on and on. But then, so to me, the Vietnam experience seemed like a war that I would never want to be a part of. I'd go to Afghanistan 3 times before I go to Vietnam once, based on what I saw in the movies. How did that affect you and your decision to make this documentary?
So my dad has a lot of stories. One of the stories that I've asked my dad stories over the years, and he's told pretty much the same stories, but each time I'll learn something different in the story. Listening to him, one of the stories that I'll give, and my dad was a comical guy. He wasn't like a professional comedian, but he always found a way to make things, kind of funny. He told a story one night where they were making some movement, and he called it the ammo bearer. I guess he was the guy carrying the ammo. He was an infantry guy, so he was the guy carrying the ammo. And he said they went on a fire, and whoever the platoon leader or however they were traveling called back, say, hey, we need ammo. Called his name, Burke, we need ammo. And he said when they did that, he started looking back like, who are they talking to? They can't be talking to me. And he would tell these stories. He eventually made it up, and he eventually made it and gave them the ammo so they can, put down fire. But one of the stories that impacted me the most that I always like to hear him tell was about his friend. He had a friend that was called, my dad called it a wait a minute fine. I don't know if that was just his name or something that was general in Vietnam, but he called it a wait a minute fine. And the reason why they called it a wait a minute fine was because if you got hooked into it, you were going to have to wait a minute before you can get out of it. So apparently one of his friends, somehow he had an issue with a grenade. I don't know exactly the stories. I think their grenades had a different technology than they did modern. And he said somehow the guy got caught in and the grenade caught him, and that was it. Somehow the grenade got, the pin pulled somehow. I didn't ask too many questions, but those kind of stories really impacted me, and I could tell it impacted him. My dad didn't cry a lot, but you could see him when he told that story. You could see it in his eyes. That it was a hurtful thing for him. So.
No, but watching those different movies, did you see a lot of those movies growing up as a kid? Those Vietnam stories.
So my dad, he didn't like Vietnam stuff. He liked talking about it to us, but there were a lot of things that he didn't like. But I did see Full Metal Jacket. I don't think he watched it. He would never. He wouldn't watch stuff like that. My dad, he was, and he went through phases, and I think that was part of the mental health part that we didn't really know back then. He went through phases with Vietnam because when we were young, I never remember him ever allowing us to pop bubble gum. He never wanted us to pop bubble gum because it always reminded him of things blowing up. So he hated that. And apparently I learned this later in life, and that's another interesting thing about this is as I talk to parents or uncles and aunts, I'm hearing different stories about how my dad was acting when he came back. And even my aunt said that when he came back, he didn't like that, so that things like that were interesting. But we never watched those movies together. But I believe I did see Full Metal Jacket, but it's been a very long time since I've seen that movie. But it was a very impactful movie.
Wow. So tell us about your podcast, because you focus on mental health awareness on your podcast, and you experienced issues with mental health, seeing someone that's obviously going through some type of PTSD, because the things you describe are things that people who've been through combat experience and kind of show when they come back home.
Yeah, so my podcast is it's a variety show, but my latest focus has been on mental health, and definitely experiencing this with my dad, because there are some things that I could not explain as a young person that my dad went through, that I saw him go through. I just couldn't understand. And then bringing it full circle, when I had my own type of issue, is really when everything really started to register with me as far as mental health goes, because I would always hear the stories. People say, well, I can't do this, I can't do that. And I never understood it until I went through it myself. And then even last month was Suicide Prevention Awareness Month. And I'm thankful to God that I never got to that point, but just understanding that some people think that when you're going through some type of mental health crisis, you can just think it away or pray it away or whatever it is that you do. That really had a big impact on me. And I really want to get the message out that, hey, when people are going through stuff mentally, just do the best you can to be there for them. And I'm really thankful to the organization, whichever organization it was. They now have a call line, 988, where you can just call it almost like you're calling 911. Mm-hmm. And I'm really appreciative for that, because a lot of people didn't know where to go. Now, if someone is going through something, you can give them a card and say, hey, 988 is your number. Someone will call, someone will talk to you. And last thing I'll say real quick regarding that, because it's around mental health, and I'm going to talk about this in a few days. My wife and I both actually experienced witnessing two people after they attempted to take their own life. And my thought is always, what could that person have possibly been going through to feel like they have to end it all? And to see two unique situations of people that we did not even know. One, I'm not sure if he survived. The other one, I know he didn't survive. But, so that's where I am with the mental health, and that's why I'm involved, because it's a serious thing. And in our community, in my community, the Black African American community, we don't talk about it very much. And I think it's time for us to do that a little more.
Now, Keisha, because Luke brought up a very interesting point, and you're a caregiver, so I wanted to get your input on this. As a person who lives with someone or loves someone with mental health issues, is that person who lives with that mental person who's going through trauma or PTSD, whatever it might be, are they a caregiver in your eyes?
Oh, most definitely. Yeah, you take on so many different things. You take on the different emotions and the different changes in emotions, whether, that person may be happy, they may be sad, and it can actually make you have to start dealing with emotional issues yourself as well. But most definitely, I would consider that person being a caregiver.
And what's the best way for that caregiver to kind of thrive or not just live or survive, but thrive in that kind of environment?
It's so hard because each situation is different, but we always tell caregivers that, first of all, that you're not alone. We try to give resources, whether it's the VA, whether it's just other local resources, because a lot of times we have the state resources, the federal resources, the national resources, but a lot of times the ones that are going to be most immediate to you are going to be those local resources, to be able to reach out to them, to have someone that you can talk to, sometimes whether it's a sibling, a spouse, but don't keep it to yourself. That's just really, 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 really important.
I think that's good advice, because I think a lot of people that are living with people with PTSD or with any kind of mental health issue, that's maybe not even seeing any kind of seeking any kind of professional help. They are, in a way, don't even see themselves as caregivers, but they are, in a way, being caregivers. They have to do something to keep the family together, to tend to that person and their needs. But you got to, I think it's really important, like you mentioned, you have to get the tools or proper tools around you so you can be an effective caregiver, because you are a caregiver.
That kind of even goes back to even the documentary that Luke is working, that he's producing for his father. You have to look at it from the memories you created. Memories, like, wow, he has this legacy that he can share with his children about their grandfather and different things like that. But it is also a way to learn about those different things, maybe those different things like you mentioned about chewing bubble gum, those triggers that can help, and then you document those things down. And then as that caregiver, say like if you're going to the VA to try to get that person resources or help or aid, you have more information. So you can look at it as like a twofold thing, to be really, really helpful for you as a caregiver to care for that person, whether it's getting financial needs or medical attention, mental health awareness, whatever it is, it's just really, really helpful.
Now, Luke, tell me about what your father said to you that had the biggest impact on him.
On him?
Mm-hmm.
Well, as I mentioned before, he talked about, losing his friends. He talked about, being 19 years old. I have a clip of him where he talks about when he finally had to tell his family that he was going to Vietnam. He dreaded telling them that he was going to Vietnam. Him being so close to death was another thing that he used to talk about. And it's interesting because to tie that in together, my dad, he actually passed in 2021, but one of the hardest conversations we had to have with the medical staff and having my family on the phone, I kind of, I was kind of talking to the doctor every day, trying to research stuff. And one of the hardest things to do was to tell the doctors and to tell my family, hey, my dad is not afraid of death. Right. And, he talked about, because he's always said that to me. And my dad is the only guy that I ever felt like didn't have any fears. But the things that impacted him were being so close to death. And these are things that you kind of have to pick up in between the lines. Like I said, losing his friends and never, one of the biggest thing I would say impacted him is I don't believe he ever got closure on Vietnam. I don't believe he ever got closure. There was never a point where, because a lot of Vietnam veterans are still looking back and they're saying, why were we there? What were we doing? Mm-hmm. He never got that closure, and they will never get that closure, because we're at a point now where our Vietnam vets are, they're getting older, they're leaving us. And to go back to that, that's another reason why I wanted to document this story. I did a training a few years ago. I was in a local project called Oral History Project. And I learned this guy named Chris Hall. He did a class for us. He was a documentary guy. And I think he studied a lot of Ken Burns, who did the Vietnam documentary. And he told us that he had about 17 hours of video just of his dad talking.
Wow.
And I was amazed at this, and he encouraged us to do this. So immediately after doing that, I said, I have to do this. And I finally had the opportunity to sit down with my dad. At first, I was kind of, I got to do it professional. I got to do it. And then I started feeling this urgency. I said, you know what? I have to do this. So every time I was around my dad, if I only had my cell phone, I just picked up my cell phone. If I was going home to do something, I would bring my camera equipment so we can get them on camera. And it turned out to grow, because there was even one video where my mom was on there, and he was telling stories about Vietnam, and they were kind of going back and forth, joking around about different stuff. But it was really cool. But I think him being close to death and him not really not knowing what was going to happen. But the last thing I'll say is the video clip that I have. My dad had this confidence about himself, and one of the things he said in the video, he said, "I'm going, but I'm coming back." And he said that. He said that's what he told his family. He was going, but he was coming back. And so, yeah, I mean, a lot of stuff. And especially, and if I can continue real quick, the Agent Orange had an impact on him. My dad, the bottom of my dad's feet looked horrible.
Wow. We got about 10 seconds left.
The bottom of his feet looked horrible. Okay.
Just so you know, we got 10 seconds left. But I wanted to come. We got to have you back on the show because we're actually we're about out of time. I wanted to ask you real quick though, a yes or no question, because your stories about your dad going to Vietnam, his experiences getting drafted, and then coming home. I guess so. The whole journey of him going to Vietnam. Have you ever been to Vietnam, and are you planning to go for this documentary?
I would love to go, but I've only been to Korea.
Okay. Well, thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. We got to have you back to go more into this documentary, and particularly after this is finished. We will love to give information about it, tell people where to see it, because it sounds like it's going to be really, really good, really entertaining, and also very enlightening and informative and educational. Appreciate you, Luke. Appreciate you, Keisha. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Sean.
Thank you.
This is America's Heroes Group. We'll be right back.
Hi, this is Cliff Kelley, Vietnam veteran, co-founder, and host of America's Heroes Group. We have helped hundreds and thousands of veterans find the resources they needed to move on past trauma, find the services they need to heal, find training, jobs, and housing. That's our mission. To support this mission so that we can continue our work and have even more veteran stories of overcoming and success, we need your help. Right now, please consider making a donation to America's Heroes Group. Dig deep and give what you can to support this mission and help those veterans in need. You can donate through Chase Bank Zelle app by adding America's Heroes Group as a recipient with our phone number 312-804-5831. You can donate through PayPal on our website, americashg.org. From the home page, go to donations, or you can go straight to www.americashg.org/donations. And finally, you can send a check to America's Heroes Group, Inc., 155 North Quaker Drive, Suite 4250, Chicago, Illinois, 60606.
Welcome back. America's Heroes Group Roundtable, Mental Health Matters with our partner, NAMI Contra Costa. Today is Saturday, October 7th, 2023. October is Breast Cancer, Mental Health, National Disability, and Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Our host is Cliff Kelley. I'm Sean Claiborne, the co-host. Our executive producer is Glenda Smith. Our digital media producer is Ivan Ortega of Scouts Honor Productions. And we have a partner with us, Gigi Crowder, the executive director of NAMI Contra Costa in California. NAMI is the National Alliance on Mental Illness and Advocacy Group founded by family members with people of mental illness. Discussion today is going to be healing through music and Fred Hammond's concert, A Time to Heal, From Pain to Purpose. That was presented by NAMI Contra Costa that just happened last weekend. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
So tell us about this concert you had. So you had Fred Hammond, mega star in gospel music. If you don't know, if you're not familiar with Fred Hammond, he's a mega star in gospel music. He has a successful recording career, goes back some 25 years or so. Over those years, he won 4 Stellar Awards, 6 Dove Awards, like 13 Grammys, 13 Grammy nominations, 1 win in 2008. He won the Grammy once in 2008. And he had albums you might be familiar with. Love Unstoppable is one of my favorites. So how did you put this together, and what was the purpose of the concert? Because it had a special purpose that you wanted to create with this concert.
We definitely did. I've been partnering with the faith community in Alameda County probably about 10 years now, and we had titled it From Pain to Purpose. And we recognize at NAMI Contra Costa that many times when people are experiencing mental health challenges or their families are supporting a loved one, they most often will turn to their faith community for support. And then I started personally digging a little deeper into what is it about the faith community that supports people And I think it's that experience that many experience when they go in on a Sunday morning. We usually set the atmosphere, I'll say it that way, with music. And so I started paying attention to the type of music that I listen to when I'm having a difficult time. And usually for me, it has been because in addition to doing mental health work, I'm on the social justice. I do a lot of social justice work on behalf of those impacted by mental illness. And for me, it's always been no weapon formed against me shall prosper. That's one of my favorite Fred Hammond songs. And so when we start doing a little mini survey, we recognize that individuals, not unlike myself, do turn to music when they're having a difficult time. And our little mini survey in the Faith Center I was working with, Fred Hammond came out to be, he and Marvin Sapp, one of the two individuals that have songs that people kind of use as daily affirmations. And so we thought that if we could come together and have that type of a healing, because mental health dollars were paying for this, so it couldn't be a gospel concert, but it could be a healing event. And so we were able to secure the funds and sponsors, and it took us a couple of months to get a date put in place with Mr. Hammond and his team. But once we got it, it was, one of the most probably transformational events that I've ever held, because individuals came the first day for a workshop where he actually shared testimony and gave some praise teams and worship teams some insights on why he created the music, what kind of space, and some kind of even technology around how you line up the music to meet the need and what chords you should use if you're really trying to evoke emotion for people. And then the next day was open to everyone, and it was a beautiful experience.
Wow, the science behind using chords to affect emotion, that's really powerful. Now, when you met him, what was your first impression of Fred Hammond?
I was overwhelmed because I was like, I actually asked him, can I really touch you so I can make sure this dream that I had of bringing you out here has really been realized? Because when we started with the idea, I'm a big dreamer. And so when I first presented it to the funders, we weren't sure if we'd get approval, but it's a community-defined strategy. A lot of times people use terminology like evidence-based practices, and there's a lot of science behind it and a lot of research. But in some of our BIPOC communities, we've had just as much success with community-defined strategies of healing. And that worship experience, I'll call it that, with him on Sunday when he called men up to the stage and had them turn around and sing to the women, it was so impactful. There were tears, there were breakthrough, and the conversations that I had with people after the event was, we need to do this more often. After going through COVID, we haven't had choirs in the same way, and we haven't had kind of like those revivals that you'd have at church, because people really haven't started gathering in the church that we utilize. That was the most people they've had, since COVID at one time. So I think I was, I was starstruck, but he was so human and so able to connect, so personable that and he calls himself Uncle Fred now. So by the time he got there, it felt very nurturing.
Wow, and you got to appreciate the fact that somebody of that magnitude has the time. He's been around for some years. It's not like he's a young spring chicken, but he's been around for a long time. But he's still going out and hit hard to go and share information. And like you mentioned, he gave a workshop. Like how many artists that will do that, give a workshop for people to attend where you can actually, one-on-one and share information and help people heal and help others heal.
Yeah, he said it was the first time. He wasn't familiar with the concept that, I kind of came up with, but remember I was trying to utilize the terminology we need to use to make sure that people understood this was to improve mental health and emotional well-being. So the workshop had to be designed in such a way, and he and his team kept coming back, now, what exactly?
Wow.
But as soon as he came out and started sharing his testimony and was able to connect people to sadly, his pain and how he personally used music to feel better, then I recognized, he had the template already himself. He didn't need, me to coach him about what schizophrenia, bipolar, or any of that was. He actually was sharing a testimony of an individual, meaning himself, who lived with PTSD.
Wow. I'm sure you got a lot of information out of you, though, because, you're the expert in a lot of these areas. How do you use music to heal in your everyday life with the people that you impact? Not so much personally, but people that you impact.
Yeah, when individuals call us looking for support, sometimes because NAMI is non-clinical supports for individuals, we can give referrals, but you're not going to see a licensed clinical social worker that same day. So we often go through conversations like, well, what do you do to make you feel better when you're having a difficult time? And a lot of times when people call us, and we're one of the nonprofit agencies that have already acknowledged that faith plays a significant role throughout our NAMIs across the nation. We have a faith net. So when I ask them that question, often they want us to pray with them, and we will. We'll pray with individuals, and then we'll say, now, we're going to have to get off the phone with you. Some people say that they pray on their own and they feel better. Some people say they read Holy Scripture, they feel better. Some people say they take walks in nature. Some people practice other things like yoga. But when I say to individuals, what helps me sometimes is when I listen to some inspirational music or gospel music, they say, oh, yeah, me too. So sometimes you have to remind people that they feel better as long as they're not listening to the blues or listening to songs that get them stuck in the pain. Most people have recognized that music can kind of be a healing source. I think even, for our educational systems, we all mostly had to take a music class in elementary school. Historically, I don't know if the funds are there now, but it's because, music is science. Music is math. It can be supportive of foreign language. It's history. It's all those things. Of course, we know it's an art form, but when music gets in you, it really gets in you. It's the only form of information that travels from the right hemisphere of your brain to the left uninterrupted. So when it gets in you, it really gets in you. And so many of us have affirmations, but the music kind of pounds it in there when you're saying we're blessed in the city, we're blessed when we come and when we go. Some of Fred Hammond's lyrics actually remind you you're not doing this alone.
Well, I think that's really impactful that people to understand that there's even been studies that show that when you play music to plants actually grow better when they're around music, and certain types of music actually interact with certain animals better than others. And, kids' brains develop better when they're exposed to learning how to play music, which is really impactful. So what was your favorite moment in the concert itself?
I would have to say it was for me when he called the men up and they started singing. And they were singing we were in Oakland, so they sung a song created in Oakland, Oh Happy Day. And so when they started singing that, and when he started talking about the church we were in was Bishop Ernestine Ring. She was one of the first African-American faith leaders, and at one time for Ebony Magazine, she was voted as one of the 50 most influential faith leaders. And because it's in the middle of Oakland and now a very, urban area, when you come up to the church itself, it's beautiful, but you're seeing a lot of the blight that's now taken over. And he was saying, you guys got me in the hood. But he said, let me speak into the men who might live in this neighborhood. Let me speak into their lives about what's possible. And that, he didn't have to sing at that point, because once he started talking and I looked around the room and I saw him share his story, and people like chains were falling off of them because, sometimes when you get a testimony from someone who for you feels unreachable, like you would never, I heard people say, I never thought I'd ever be this close to him. His music has gotten me through some difficult times. when I saw like a softening of the men and like they were released from something they were carrying that was heavy, that was what was most impactful for me.
Wow. Did the guys know how to sing when they got up on stage?
Not all of them, but that's why we had that day before. We wanted to make sure even the worship and the praise teams that are, kind of rusty because they had not been back and practicing in that way, that they were getting some of the tools. And so he was, he gave some pointers to a couple of people about, how they could improve. He said sometimes choir directors have to, be more honest about whether a person carries a skill set to be in the choir, and that there's other roles they could play at the church. And then, people thinking they're a tenor when they're a soprano, people who want to do solos but don't necessarily have the gift of song. So he made, he was humorous as well, and that was fun. And everyone walked away. We even gave away certificates for the people who participated so that they could say they participated in that workshop.
Do you think you could take this as concert experience? Because I've heard of a concert, although it kind of doesn't make sense that I've never heard of it before because it almost seems like an obvious fit. I mean, you don't go to concerts to get depressed. You don't go to music concerts to, waste time. You go there because you want to have fun. It's going to be an experience. Yeah. There's going to be if it's a person that you really, really, really like, it could be a mega concert where there's tens of thousands of people, or it could just be a concert in a small spot, a hole in the wall that has your favorite band. They can be life-changing events. So would you want to do something like this with this specifically themed for healing, emotional healing, particularly other parts of the country?
Definitely. And this was, of course, the first, and like I said earlier, I had to convince the funders that it does connect to mental health, that, it wasn't an evidence-based practice, but if you give me time, I can prove it is. And so that this was the first. I'm already in conversations with another person who I particularly love, who I've done a little bit of work before at the beginning of COVID. I was on a panel that she facilitated from her. She's the first lady, but she recognized mental health as being important and supporting individuals to make decisions about vaccination. So I'll just drop the name. Erica Campbell. So I'm trying to, I saw such a powerful move with the men. I thought to myself, wow, when you walk into most churches now, there's more women than men, so we need to have that as well. And so I've reached out to her management team to see if we can get her to come for our next round, hopefully in February. So we'll see. And of course, if this gets the type of attention I feel like it should, because why Alameda County, why Contra Costa County, there's been a lot of pain in those cities. And so trying to bring back something, sometimes people say faith-based services, and I'll say hope-based, because that's ultimately where we're trying to get people to feel more optimistic about their future. So I'll say hope-based services, and that's what we were successful in pulling that off last weekend.
Why do you think there is more? Do you think there's more pain in the cities, in your areas, than there was, say, maybe 20 years ago, 10, 15 years ago?
Yes, and I think individuals from younger ages are actually experiencing the pain. So that's what's so, unfortunate for me. We've had some real challenges in the northern part of California in recent months. I mean, we had our challenges with law enforcement and released scandalous, racialized text messages. And then we also had, in Oakland, California, a beloved police chief who was terminated, and now he's trying to get his job back. And, I had to hire security there because the neighborhood, of course, we had to worry about people not getting their cars broken into. So, yeah, there's a sinking feeling in my heart sometimes, being born and raised in Oakland, when I drive into the city and I see the issues with the unsheltered. So in California, the governor is working on a new legislation that'll be on the ballot. Well, he would take some of the funds from mental health and put them in substance use. And some families, members in the mental health, feel like, oh, don't do that. We don't have enough treatment services. But I do know that there's individuals who did get treated early enough, so they're self-medicating. So we have to do more to address the needs of those who have substance abuse illnesses.
Mm. Do you think that there's misallocation of funds to the extent where maybe there's maybe too much money and ineffective things and not enough money really put into preventative things like mental health? One of the things that's happening here in Chicago is that the mayor, this particular mayor, he is actually taking a stance on trying to fund mental health, and he even got a lot of heat because they accused him of being a defunded the police guy. In reality, he's just trying to make police work smarter rather than harder, and then using those funds instead of just hiring more cops and investing in more hardware for the police, using that money to do preventative things so you don't have the police having to answer mental health calls.
Yes, and so you may recall on this show we introduced 988, California's bill is named after a young man, Miles Hall, who was killed, as we push now for non-police response for mental health. So I think every city, so your legislative leader in Chicago is going around the right track because it should be about prevention. I'm not interested in having more psych emergency beds. I'm interested in going into the schools and going, the places where you find young people. In most counties, their juvenile justice system, 60 to 70% of the young people there have a diagnosed mental illness. Not, they may be living with this. No, it's diagnosed. So should they be getting treatment versus being criminalized? Couldn't we have caught it at an earlier age? Because we know that trauma is a precursor for some of the mental health challenges that people later experience. You have a person who's traumatized, and then you put them in a restrictive environment, and then you wonder why they create more problems and end up in our adult jail systems. It's because they didn't get it addressed at an early age. And I actually feel like music and some of the work I did while working for Alameda County with hip-hop therapy is one of the preventative ways. You may have great difficulty with getting some youth to talk about their feelings just from regular conversation, but if you could get them to rap about it, then, they're more comfortable. It's a more comfortable environment for them, and they share through music. And we know that some of the youth that were having a difficult time, once they got connected to the hip-hop therapy program, actually formed connection with other youth, and then some of the bad choice behavior was eliminated for many of them.
Wow, that's pretty amazing because, you don't oftentimes rap and hip hop gets a bad rap because they say that it has like all these negative undertones and negative imagery and negative words and promotes violence and things like that. And you also see a lot of violence. We just recently in the news, a big story nowadays is 20 years after his death, Tupac's killer is apprehended. Right. A famous rap star. And remember, that's my generation, two of your biggest stars dying almost back to back, Biggie Smalls and Tupac, but at the end of the day, you still have to look at the fact that, music got those guys out of bad situations. Their lives would have been totally different if they didn't have music as an outlet. And the people's lives that they actually helped. People like songs like Tupac's song, Brenda Got a Baby. I know people that were going, young mothers who were teenagers who, were struggling, who decided to have their children. When Brenda had got a baby, that spoke to them and gave them hope and helped them, become successful mothers.
And I do recall that many of the, from a different era. So I do remember the first, hip-hop songs or rap music that I heard with things like, wasn't it Curtis Blow, Don't Push Me, I'm Close to the Edge?
That was, it wasn't Curtis Blow, but I know that song you're talking about, yeah. I forget the name of it. I think World Class Wrecking Crew. No, it wasn't World Class Wrecking Crew. Another Dr. Dre. I forget. Yeah, I know you're talking about that. Yeah.
But in that era, a lot of the hip-hop songs at that time were actually identifying challenges in the community and sharing it. And so it was more conscious rap than it was negative influence rap. But even many of the individuals, like you said, who started with the negative influence, they were selling drugs, and then they switched over to music, and that was their dream, to not stay in that life, which almost guarantees you will eventually go to jail or destroy your community, and 50 years later, it's still relevant. And I think there has been a move back to some of the music. I mean, I get disappointed when I see the young girls that some of the music they're coming out with and some of the provocative, But I do think that there's some value. There was one my sons used to listen to, and I knew I was in trouble when my oldest of my twin sons was listening to Kanye rap, and his number one song that made him was College Dropout. And I was like, son, cut that off. And then, a year later after he's in college, he's like, Mom, I'm coming home. I don't want to do this. I want to do music. I was like, oh, boy, I saw this coming. Should have took that out of his CD player.
Kanye West is probably not the first person you want to take advice from. If you look at his track record, look what
right.
But I do see hope in using music as therapy and in creating more venues like this across the country, because I think it is needed, and well, you proved it. It was successful. It's something that people got something out of, I would think that was also an economically or financially successful event that you guys had.
Oh, yeah. It was once I was clear and had recovered the upfront funds that the state, which, they didn't tell me to pay it back. I know some people had purchased it to attend, but I was like, don't hold up the line. Just let them come on in. If they're here, they need to be here. And then I started making calls to people who I knew could not afford the nominal cost of $50, but they couldn't afford it. I was like, show up and just tell them at the front desk you're a special guest of Gigi Crowder and come on in. Yeah.
Wow. Now I'm thinking we need to bring him out to Harvey, Illinois, or something like that.
I would love to do that. Yes, for sure.
That'd be awesome. It's a great idea. I really think that was something that. I mean, how did you come up with that idea? What made you disconnect and say, okay, I'm gonna get an artist, and then raise money, and then get a venue. Like you're a concert promoter now, basically.
Well, and they were calling me a promoter. I'm saying, I'm not a promoter. Don't put me in that category. But I guess on all the contracts that I signed under the letter of promoter. I'll be honest and say God gave it to me. I was dealing with some heavy, not personally, but through work. It just seemed like so many people were having such a difficult time. Young people were dying at the hands of law enforcement, and it just was like, wow, let me start listening to my music. And then I'll say, as Biggie Small said, I had a dream, and maybe I'll say Martin Luther King, I had a dream. And then I made a phone call to a local rapper. He may be a little better known across, California, Mr. Fab, and he acknowledged he lived with mental health challenges, and he said he would come and talk to a younger crowd, and he calls his thug therapy. So I just saw the opportunity for him. I said, if I could get him for that amount, how much can I get for Fred Hammond? So I kept pushing. And I'm still going to work with Mr. Fab, but I think for the times and what we were trying to accomplish, kicking it off with Fred Hammond was more important.
Gigi Crowder, really appreciate your time. You gave us a lot of information and some great ideas. I think it was really helpful that you did that, and also hope that you can do it again. And maybe share your strategies with other people on how to do that for other people around the country, particularly churches. I think churches are going to be really receptive about that. We maybe need to talk about this again, or maybe even do a separate podcast on what you did and how you did it.
I'd love to. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. So for our listening audience, thank you for listening to us on every Saturday, 4 to 6 p.m. And if you have any questions for America's Heroes Group, make sure that you give us the information, but check us out on our YouTube station, on our YouTube channel, and also on our Facebook page. You can also reach out to us at our phone number. That number is, as always, 312-803-2618. That's 312-803-2618. And also email us at info@americashg.org. That's info@americashg.org. Let us know what you're thinking about so we can make our shows better, and also get to the topics that you want to hear about, because that's really important, what makes us thrive. And if you can, donate to our show. We're a nonprofit 501c3. And we'll see you again next week. Be safe, be healthy, and of course, as always, be good Americans. Thank you for your time.